Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's your host, John Scardina. I am so excited for this episode because my long-term friend in emergency response and planning, Heidi Hessler, the CEO of Futurity IT, is going to be joining us today. She and I kind of have a nice long history now. We've worked on a lot of different projects together, different clients for Doberman, her clients. We've talked about what technology can do for response as per the title of this episode. And so we really just want to talk about that to help the field understand what technologies can do for you through different case studies with Heidi. Heidi, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, I'm so excited to be here today.
Yeah, so let's talk about, just like that history. Like I mentioned, so I'm just going to do a very brief. Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians in California, University of New York, or rather the State University of New York, Albany. So on the opposite side of the country, you've been working with Alabama. You've been working with, all these different localities all over the United States for several years now. And I've gotten to be luckily involved in some of that. Just really impressed with what you're doing. Can you tell us first your kind of story and like why this matters to you? Like why technology for emergency management?
Well, absolutely, John. We are in now 30 states, including the state of Oregon. And I've been with Futurity since 2012. In 2014, I became the CEO, and that was quite a story in of itself. We started, our original founder was really interested in streamlining that process between, the pen and paper, the damage assessments that needed to happen, and how that was a very delayed process. He did his dissertation on that topic. He created the software around solving that problem, and he began to launch the product. 2011, 2012, we hit the ground running together, and I was the sales manager at that time, and got a call suddenly from his son that he had passed away, and it was a big shock. He was a good friend of mine, and I had a decision to make at that point. And I made the decision to keep the company going, and I'm really happy that we did, because ultimately, now we're serving a lot of folks in EM, and it's been a long road and a lot of life lessons and a big journey. But I think one thing that is important to me is, I remember my husband telling me during that time, whatever you do, make sure you're able to look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you are every morning. I think our customers teach us that also. All the emergency managers, that we work with, I just call them salt of the earth people, because they're real. They deal with real disaster, issues that most people can't even imagine dealing with. And so it's important to me to really provide them with software that is easy for them to use. They can pick it up with very little training and, go walk out the door and deal with it, that whatever is out that door waiting for them, knowing they have a solid foundation in our software that they can rely on. They don't have to, they don't have to question that. And we've been around so long and have been utilized in so many disasters that, it's something I feel completely, excited and proud to offer them. I know it's solid. And so I just want to, as we continued on our journey, it's my goal to really provide more tools for them. And so that's really where I sit. Our software is used in both blue and gray sky days, and it's something that, I think the biggest privilege I have is working with emergency managers every day, and those that serve, in that role. And so, yeah, that's who I am. That's our company in a nutshell. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here, John.
I think that's that legacy story that you're sharing, and you shared it with me obviously before, and it was impressive to think, like, beyond business, do you want to carry on this legacy of what somebody passionately believed in and helping out emergency managers? I will say that as you were talking about the people who have to think about disasters every day and the impacts of those and the cascading impacts, a little quip from my good friend Dan Scott, who was on this podcast before. He shared a meme that said, even fire, police, and EMS need a hero. and I love that. It's just like a funny little thing. But at
Yeah.
the same time, if we are going to be impactful in our field, we need emergency managers are all about coordination. And
Mhm.
that coordination piece, when it's done on pen and paper, I have been at those disasters where somebody hands me a list of 200 addresses that they hand wrote out, that they did drive-by analysis
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like what they thought that, and it was like, this is the worst. Like, I can't use it. Like, how am I supposed to go to Congress to prove that, like, yes, this was the damage assessment? But to actually see that on a map and to capture that data, and even in the blue sky stuff, and plan for future events, and looking at historical events captured through that, it
Mhm.
it makes us more effective in that strategic approach of coordination. And that's really where I became a huge fan of not just your software. I don't want this to be a sales pitch, of course, but of what you're
Sure.
doing and the idea of what you're doing. And of course, carrying on that legacy, in your own right. You should be very proud of what you've done and what you're doing. And I'm proud that, we've been able to work together in the past, because, and hopefully in the future, because I see those impacts down the road as well. And so just literally hats off to you if you're watching the video. But
Oh, thanks, John. I mean, honestly, I have to say, one of the key pieces, and probably most people who try to do something bigger than themselves would say, it's the team around you that really, it's a team effort, and we have a great team. I know a lot of our customers talk about our one of our main customers success people, Andre Radler, and they we just we have people who really care. I'm surrounded with people that really care about our customers, and that's the feedback that we get. And I think we all should probably live that way. Surround yourself with people that are dedicated, loyal, and ready to serve.
real quick, we're going to pause for this week's Disaster Tough endorsements. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today. The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at L3Harris.com right now. The Readiness Lab is trailblazing disaster readiness. Early access for the highly anticipated course, Emergency Management Response for Dynamic Populations, is currently live. Think you have what it takes? Join us in Atlanta for an immersive experience. Space is limited to 40. Go to thereadinnesslab.com/training to learn more. Okay, let's jump back in. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's like let's see, a banner somewhere, a bumper sticker.
I try to come up with slogans for you, John.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, we are. We need a social media person. So on top of being the CEO of a pretty successful company, you can do social media for us. But
Right, right.
let's talk about some of the case studies, because like I said, we've worked together on a few different projects. One of the ones that I did mention several of them, and I'm proud of all of them, honestly. But I thought it was amazing that I reached out to you guys and said, "Hey, State University of New York, Albany, they're trying to do some stuff with pandemic. They're really focused on technologies. Would you be able to do a case study with their students and essentially
Mhm,
volunteer your time and your resources?" Which honestly, like, is huge, because it is expensive to run a business and to produce this stuff. And
mhm.
I knew that was a financial hit for you guys, and yet you still did it. And I'm just I think that just again speaks to who you are and who you are as a company. But in terms of that case study, now I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, and you can maybe share some more details behind it. But I responded to Hurricane Matthew in Florida,
Mhm,
and when just a little background here, we deployed to FEMA Region 4 in Atlanta. We were supposed to go to South Carolina and essentially became storm chasers when there was a shift and it looked like it was going to hit Florida. And so
mhm,
we changed directions and we beelined it to Florida. And then for those who followed Hurricane Matthew, major impacts, not so much in Florida. It did hit the coast. It kind of skipped over the coast, but it really impacted South and North Carolina. And I
Right.
believe that's the case study that the students worked on with SUNY. So can you talk about that case study and
Yeah.
some of the
You
stuff?
know, that was actually really fun. I'm a big believer in technology, and so it was great to expose, folks who are going into the field to our technology and what we offer, and also really take, a real life case study. We definitely whitewashed whatever the name of it was. They didn't know what the name was, but they
Smart.
had to anticipate and say how they would have responded to this event. And it was exciting because it gave them the opportunity to, put themselves in the shoes of, where they're going, an emergency manager, and see the details and facts that those that actually responded to Matthew had in front of them. And and so it was more than a case study. It was really, they were walking through that process of responding and trying to figure out how they would have responded as if they were, there on the scene. And so they used our technology, and they saw, where it ultimately landed on our mapping. And part of what we offer is mobile. And so I think that's a big step forward for the field, to be able to report straight from the field instead of a phone call. Things are so scrambled, and you're dealing with shelters and so many different factors that I think being able to, put those key elements in, send them off. It's not a phone call; it's automatically received at the EOC, and so they really, they took hold of that, and it was a pretty big class. I think it was about 30 people who were in. It was international, and so it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, like one of the things that we've been addressing, or at least I've been attacking online, is the lack of standardization and immersive training.
Right.
There's a big feather in our cap where we're actually addressing that, finding solutions. We're doing a certification on dynamic populations in the first week of August, and then we're doing
Mhm.
emergency management response technologies in October, which I believe that you're going to be at. But
Mhm.
in terms of students, like college students actually able to hypothetically walk through a scenario and
Yep.
whitewashing the name, and so they're able to just kind of step back for a second and say, "How would I do this?"
Yeah.
Without being constrained by maybe the historical data. That's what they need, and the more we can do that for people, the better they'll be prepared for events in the future. And quite frankly, it'd be like my greatest hope to see the emergency manager of the future have an expectation of technology. People are always so afraid of technology. This is one of the
Mhm.
things I hear about EM is like,
Mhm.
well, what if all the lights go out and we have to go back to paper? Do you know
Right.
how hard it is to learn how to do paper? It's not hard to learn to do paper. It's hard
Right.
to learn to do technology, and so anybody can revert. Like if all cars in the world stopped, we would learn how to ride horses again. Like we don't need to worry about that right now. What we need to worry about being most efficient for what we have, and technology makes that possible. So we should embrace it where we can, right?
Yeah, I agree, John. I mean, I think one key aspect of technology is that it does have to be extremely easy to use. I mean, our technology has been used by 70-year-old CERT team members who just, I love CERT teams. They love to go out and do the exercises and, prepare. And it has to be able to be used at for any level, I think, to be successful. But kind of back to your point on standardization, I think one thing that's missing, and what I'm a big advocate for, is mentorship within different, you know, I think that that's something that people who've been through a lot of things, like you and I, it's important that we remember that that's also our role to give back and be a mentor to people in the generations coming up. And in that way, we did an internship program through UC Davis, and we had about 10 interns who participated in learning about business. And it's something that I think all people who are in a leadership role should carve out part of their time to, give back in that way, and ensure that, the next generation has that training. And you really cannot replace that. I think you can't. It's book learning versus, people who have experiences and can talk about, what things actually look like. And I think that's missing. I don't think we take the time anymore. And so, yeah, just wanted to mention that. And I think that's something that it's a priority to you as well. So,
Yeah, of course. Like part of the podcast is to educate people and to help have those conversations, both with SMEs on this podcast, but
mhm.
also for people to think. We had a fan of the show, if that's what you want to call him, reach out to us just the other day and said, "Hey, I listened to Erica Borneman's episode 4 times in a row."
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
I love your podcast. They,
man,
just different perspectives. That's another
yeah,
thing I try to teach my kids. Oh, your perspective is one thing, but you can't ever really walk in the shoes of somebody else. And it really helps to hear their voice and their perspective on a situation or on a topic. And so I think I love your podcast for that reason, John. So
that's a nice little clip. Again, you should be my social media partner here. If everybody felt that way, that'd be great.
yeah.
No, it doesn't really speak to so much to you're talking about being surrounded by a team. And
Hmm.
I feel like every time we bring on a new guest, a new perspective, like that
Hmm.
team of people who want to give back and want to help and want to do it for the right reasons, that
Hmm.
not only expands within our own circle, but we spend a lot of time in house making sure that we have the right people coming on the show.
Hmm.
I will say, you're talking about future generations and mentorship.
Hmm.
On my bio for public speaking, because I get asked to do a couple different conferences. In
Sure.
fact, I'm speaking at the USAR conference this week, so excited for that. But I keep on saying 10 years. I've been in this for about 10 years, and I just had a birthday, and I was
Happy
thinking about
birthday.
that. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, no, let's see, like that.
You
Um,
shaved for the birthday, John? Is
for
that
the birthday, I realized I'm old enough where I don't have to have a beard to.
okay? Okay.
Um, yeah, no. I was thinking about that, and they asked for my updated bio from the conference.
Mhm.
I was like, "Oh, right, I haven't like I'm doing this now for 16 years."
Mhm.
And like, "Oh, shoot." And I
Right.
feel like this like thing of like, "Oh, like I've been in this for a little while now, enough where people who pretty soon here, next couple years, graduating high school and getting into their own EM programs, that's
Mhm.
my career is their entire lifetime." And so I was like, "Oh man, that's something to think about." And I want them to avoid maybe some of the mistakes I made, but
Mhm.
also attack faster the lessons learned that I've gained,
Yeah.
hoping that they'll propel beyond me. That's the real goal here is that like keep on pushing the field to be more and more efficient. I This whole thing of disaster tough is like I don't want to have a disaster. If they can figure out how to not have disasters, fantastic. That's the
Great.
real goal here. So,
Great.
anyways, tooting our own horns here long enough. Let's talk about some of the other case studies that you've worked on. Specifically, I'm going to call this out Alabama. You guys are
Mhm.
all over Alabama. You mentioned the state of Oregon, but in Alabama, they've had a few case studies now with different hurricanes. The
Uh-huh.
whole state's using it. Again, without going into too much of the sales pitch side, but
Right.
showing the
Right.
use of technology, how has it helped technology in Alabama?
I think it's interesting because, what I always tell our team is, software as a service, emphasis on service because, you can have technology, but you need to be able to be trained on that technology. You need to be able to reach out for help. And those are sort of that's the foundation of most of our rollouts of software. Now, Alabama, um, they got our software and were immediately hit by back to back disasters, Zeta and Sally, and so they had to pick it up and use it. They had very little training, if any. We were begging them to please, but they have such a great team there, and they were able to reach out for the help they needed. They got all their users added, but really what I saw was the state and the counties working really well together. And so, they had a really wonderful documentation because everybody was on board and they had good communication. And so that technology is only a part of the equation there. It really needs to be something that's fostered. I think the conferences are great. We're going to be heading out to the Alabama conference next month, actually 30 days, a little bit less than 30 days to go speak at that conference. But I really think that it's a kind of there's a lot of different prongs to a successful approach. I felt like theirs was really successful. They were able to capture the information for FEMA that they needed. I understand FEMA was pretty happy with that documentation, and they've continued on since. I think that was a few years ago now, and they have continuously used the system to prepare also, not just to respond. And so not sure if that answered your question, but
I think it does.
that's
I
what
mean,
I have on that, John.
well, it's you talk about Zeta, if I remember
Uh-huh.
the name, and Sally hurricanes that impacted Alabama,
Uh-huh.
what it does. And again, this is like the feather to your cap episode, I guess. But you're talking about very little time to train and the ability to use. Again, I like the example of the 70-year-old CERT member. There is
Mhm.
definitely in response, you have a lot of volunteers and a lot of professionals who are either retired, and so they become they support FEMA reservists. Like, it's a
Mhm.
great program for people who are wanting to get deployed and to help out as
Mhm.
specialists. And there's often a learning curve, both of EM and the technologies we used, i.e., the paper addresses with handwritten addresses versus technology.
Mhm.
And I do think as future generations come in, they'll be more and more, natural. But
Yeah,
that
definitely. I
stopgap
think too.
is important too. And so, a great use case in terms of um, the reality that we need technology
Mhm.
more than just damage assessments, more than just the planning process. Technology as a tool in the toolbox. What is your pitch on emergency managers who push back on, like, well, we've always done it this way, or paper works well for us, or we blah 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 blah, all the excuses that don't really matter. What do you
Well,
say to those
yeah.
to help them out?
And I have respect for their perspective. They've used it's something that works well enough for them, and so, I just encourage a little bit of outside of the box thinking. Could it be better? What can you gain from using technology? What can you gain by not having to field the phone calls, or having to deal with the paperwork, or having instant awareness of what's happening
Mm,
after a disaster? What can you gain from that? And honestly, people really do embrace technology quite a bit now, and they're really looking for technology to work for them. And so that's our challenge, to continue to work for our customer, build beyond what we have, and continue to really hear what our customers need. And I think all technology companies should be doing that. I think if your technology company that you're working with is limiting the ability for you to, you need something, and they can't do that, and they're not listening, I think that's probably, that could be an issue, because all technology companies are not the same. They don't
mm,
all have the same philosophy. And so I think it's important to also really vet whoever you are thinking of, going forward with, whatever technology company that is. Call their references, find out, did this really work? And also, I think, try it out, do a trial. There's a lot of different ways to see, does this actually work? Because it's easy for, I have salespeople, and we always try to put our best foot forward, but you really cannot duplicate, talking to people and who've used technology, and finding out, what's that team like, what's that technology like. And I think that goes for any. I think that's a good, really, for, I think, because the software is so important and needs to be used during such critical times. I think that's an important thing, to vet your technology.
mm,
And our technology has been vetted quite a bit, because we're out there, Anchorage earthquake, um, Nebraska, we've got over 30 counties using us
mm,
out there for flooding. I'm sure there's a lot of different, issues that we have helped respond to, but all across the country, North Carolina, we hear Even we have great users in Tennessee. It's hard to list them all because there are 30 states where we're being used, but just through the years, I'm on the trainings quite a bit actually because I want to hear what the customers say in response to our technology, and those are the just-in-time trainings. And so, really, I think looking to see what is the leadership of the company, how much do they care? Are they just kind of trying to sell you, user licenses? With our technology right now, it's unlimited users because we want people to use our technology. That's not common. That's not normal. And I've stuck behind that because you never know who's going to walk in the door and be able to help you. And it's not fun to have to call your technology company and say, we need to add someone or something like that. And so all the way from the beginning to end, we try to make it as easy as possible for our customers to work with us. And I think that's something that anyone looking at technology should consider. All those things. All those things.
So maybe we should rename our episode to "Not Normal" with an interview with Heidi Hessler.
Well, things are not normal with me usually.
It is not really normal. You have to be a little off to be in emergency management, anyways.
Yeah, you have to be willing to deal with the unknown, and that's something also. The unknown that I think people also are struggling with even today. How do you something happens, and I've worked with emergency managers. It seems like the case normally for some reason, as soon as you take the job, like a week or two later, a disaster hits and you've never dealt with one before.
No.
It seems like I hear that story all the time with our customers, but I think it's an interesting, they get in there and it's either sink or swim half the time. And so you figure out who you are really fast in those situations, and you figure out who your friends are. And that's been the case with me also. I mean, we've dealt with a lot of difficult things, and it's important to take responsibility for things that you don't do right, because there's no way anyone's going to do everything right. But to also just be willing to step forward in faith. There's a disaster. It's out the side of the door. You've never dealt with it. I see our customers walk out the door and do it, and I think for me, it's partially, I think, faith and knowing, if I take a step into the blackness, I know there's going to be something there for me. And so I just, it's just that next step. And I think that's important. I think kind of assessing who you are, and what, and your, willingness to take on risk, and willingness to lead during those times also. So I see that all across the country. I'm really proud of, the field. I'm really impressed by the field. And I love working with all of our, everybody. I work with so many people across the country. It's kind of interesting because a lot of times they ask me, well, what are they doing in, whatever state? I'm like, well, let me tell you, it's great usually because they're very, I know, one of our customers in Sacramento County, he talked to several of our customers in Colorado to kind of figure out the best way to maximize the usage of our technology. And they have been using our technology to do some really cool things, like to help, find out, to help serve the homeless and know where the homeless encampments are, and where the warming and cooling centers are, and just keeping that as a plan in our software. I'm really proud of those kinds of users that are willing to think outside the box and use a tool that is easy. And I like to think beautiful. I think our software is, it's not like the normal, you've got to type in little fields and it's complicated. So I try to keep it that way. I think it's better to work with things that are streamlined and easy to work with, and our customers push the limits of what it can do, because that's what kind of people they are usually. And so we respond, and we try to keep up with their all their ideas. So
that's awesome. And I think that's a great note to end on. I think the idea of, so you're talking about faith. My favorite scripture, one of my favorite scriptures is faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a step into the dark is a lot easier when you have all the data to back you up, or maybe a couple lights behind you.
Yeah.
And to kind of start to light that way. And, I think it's possible, maybe plausible is probably the better word for it, to eliminate black swans with data. If you live in Florida and you're shocked by a hurricane, well, that's pretty stupid, right? That's obvious. But there's other disaster events that are less obvious, just as important. And there's probably data that back that up. And that's the pitch for technology, is like making your life easier. Everybody gets exhausted.
Mhm.
Emergency managers definitely get exhausted in response.
Mhm.
Technology makes you a little bit less tired because it takes away things that are manual that can be automated. And again, great comments, great episode. A little bit of faith, a lot of bit of data makes your life much easier. And Heidi, again,
Thank you.
I've touted this several times on this episode already, but big fans of Futurity IT, what you're doing, your story there, and what you're doing for the field. And so, again, thanks for coming on and sharing your story with me.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. We're big fans of Disaster Tough and everything you're doing also. So looking forward to working with you in the future.
Great. And so, just letting everybody know, this episode was not sponsored by Futurity IT, maybe in the future, but this episode definitely was not. And so, we're just fans of it. We like it. And so, if you want to learn more about Futurity IT, Heidi, where can they learn more about your company?
Yeah, they can just go to futurityit.com or look for, search that term online, Futurity
Perfect.
IT.
Futurity IT. And so we'll also put it in the show notes, possibly. And if you have a question for Heidi, or you have a comment on technology, if you have a use case in it, if you're one of the 30 states and those localities that are using it, we'd love to hear about your experiences as well in the comments of Disaster Tough Podcast. That can be on any social media, from Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We'll post it. We'll also, again, we'll have it in the show notes, and we'll see you for next week.